Okay. So the last question here is, what is your vision for this church? And we I've kind of talked about this before with this. My vision for this church is what we see in Acts chapter 2. So right in Acts chapter 2, I think it starts at verse 38. After Pentecost, after there's Pentecost, Peter gives this great sermon, and 3,000 souls are baptized and brought into the church. It gives a little summary. It's 4 or 5 verses that gives a summary of what the early church was like, what they were doing. And right, that the Christian followers, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Right, that they were of one mind. They were learning together. They were having fellowship together. They were worshiping together. Right, it says daily they were together in the temple, praising God, and they were serving one another. Right, they were providing for those in need. Right, and that's my vision for this church, that we would worship together, that we would have fellowship together, that we would have that strong fellowship as a church. Not just our service has this fellowship and this other service has this fellowship, but that we would all have this fellowship together, and that we would be of one mind, that we would be serving those around us, that we would be a community that people look at from the outside and say, wow, they have something that I can't get in this world. What's different about them? That's more than just a surface level, hey, we're getting along kind of a thing. But that it's so much deeper than that. And so I personally think the move to one service is a big step towards that. Yes, there's and we've seen this already, and I think we'll continue to see it, right? There's people upset, and that there's going to be some rocky time adjusting. But I think this sets us up well to have that fellowship. The Christian life, the core is worship, right? The center of the Christian life is worship. Some people try and look at it where, right, okay, yeah, there's church, but then there's so much beyond that, right? And that church isn't all that important. From the Scripture perspective, worship with your fellow believers, worshiping God and receiving His gifts, is the center and core of the Christian life. It's the most important thing we do every single week. And from that flows everything else, right? It flows our fellowship. It flows to our service. It does all of this, like care and love of others. So it's hard to get that fellowship when we don't have that unity and worship together. And so that's a big reason why for this move. Right, and why one service instead of two? Because even with two, right, you have the two services. You're like a dual parish in one location. Right now we're like a tri-parish in one location, right? And so going to that one service, right, it gives us that building block to build upon, and from that, the possibilities are endless. Where we build from that. Right, we can build up youth groups where our youth will actually know each other instead of, well, I am an 8:30 person. Oh yeah, and you're a loft person, and we never cross over. And insert any services you want. We can have we have the women's fellowship group started up, and that's a mix of everybody. Right, that's that crossover that we're wanting to have. I'd love, and Randy's mentioned this, and I 100% agree, right, to get a men's group going, right, again, to have that fellowship there, and strengthened even more by us worshiping together too, to have youth group stuff, to have board game nights. On Tuesday, I'm going across the street to the high school and speaking to the Christian club over at the high school. They invited me to come talk to them. Right? And so, right, the Lord opens doors, right? The Lord opens windows, right? He provides things to continue the life of the church and what we do. And so, I mean, that's my vision, right? Is that we we unify together, we come together as God's people, centered around our worship, centered around our fellowship. We build that, and then once we have that, right, if we have that strong community, that fellowship, that kind of stuff we see in Acts chapter 2, everything is possible. I mean, maybe not everything, right? But, but right, right, we could do so much good. And I mean that 100%, and I believe that 100%, right? I'm not right? I don't suggest going to one service and, having to, do things different, right? To stop doing Kids for Christ and stop doing school stuff, in order to it's not my goal to destroy the church, or that I'm saying, well, I want my pet projects and I don't care about anybody else, right? I'm suggesting these difficult changes and these difficult moves because I care about this church, because I love the people here, right? I don't want to have to see this church die and then uproot my entire life to go to another call, right? That sounds horrible to me, right? I want to be here for the rest of my pastoral ministry, right? I want to see this church thrive and flourish and doing all this kind of stuff, being involved with the high school, having youth stuff, having game nights, right? Having that fellowship where we just gather around each other. Because when we have that fellowship, not only do we have that then in the good times, but in the difficult times when people are struggling, right? You have more than just the people in your one service to gather around you, right? You have the whole church to be with you and to comfort you and to support you, right? And that's what we see in Acts chapter 2. That's what we've seen in the church, and that's what I believe Holy Cross can be. And I think this is a really important step in that, and to build off of that. And so, right, this is only possible if the people of this church step up and own it, right? If half the church says, right, we don't like this, we think this is bad, and we're out of here, right? Well, then our hands are tied. But if we say, yeah, this isn't the ideal situation, but we're going to step up and we're going to make it better, we're going to make Holy Cross better than it's ever been, right? Make Holy Cross great again. Don't take that politically. But right, if we have that mindset of, right, we're going to really turn things around, and this is going to be, right, this church, I fully believe that in a matter of years, this church can be better, more united, have greater fellowship, doing so much good for the people around us, that we will be in a better state than we have been for the past 25 years. I firmly believe that. Well, we'll talk. You can talk about the finances later, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's my vision in a nutshell. And so, all right, I'm happy to talk to anyone about this, whether you agree with it, whether you have questions about it, whether you hate it and want to yell at me. Come talk to me, right? I want people to talk to me. I want people to be honest with me. Right? It does me and this church no good if you tell me one thing and then go and tell someone else what you really feel, right? Right? I want to know. I'm trying to be faithful. I'm trying to do what's best for this church, and that starts here.